Yeah, well, thanks again, Will, and also the team from Surf Lifesaving New South Wales who kind of got me onto this session just to share the challenges and opportunities that we've had around this whole side of things. So um, I guess we're kind of in a similar boat to the gang over in Surf Lifesaving New Zealand, in that we've got a really unique structure where it's not just lifeguards that we're talking about, not just a paid service. We also have to cater for that huge component of our membership base, which is volunteer. And for us at Surf Lifesaving Australia, that extends across the entire country. So, every state, different time zones, all of those kinds of things. So we've certainly shared the same challenges as Surf Lifesaving New Zealand in that regard. So one of as you can see there on that slide, that's just a quick overview of kind of what we look after at the higher level. So a lot of surf clubs, a lot of lifeguard services, a lot of different support operation entities as well. Some of those being 24/7 response as well. It's all managed through our Surfcom operations centres, which are distributed around each state. And we've got a lot of active lifeguards and lifesavers. We're talking about kind of 40,000 plus 50,000 plus active lifeguards and lifesavers. Most of those are lifesavers, so volunteers. And as in the same boat as New Zealand, we've got this split where quite a lot of lifeguards are actually volunteer lifesavers as well. So certainly one of the challenges that we've had is just that huge spread of different services, different processes across the whole country as well. And a large volunteer basis. So most of that has been the volunteer side of things. So one of the key things and learnings that has come from my perspective has been that it's quite easy to instruct a lifeguard to do something in terms of using an app. This is the process. This is how you will enter the statistics. This is what you must do at the start, middle, and end of patrol. It's quite a lot harder getting that message out to a whole bunch of volunteers who are volunteering their time for the organisation, and you can't really. It's a lot harder to instruct them or tell them how to do things, because often they're just doing things the way they want to do because they're volunteering their own time. So getting that message across and trying to make it as user friendly as possible has been a really big thing for certainly for me. And I'll just dive into the actual app, but I suppose one of the big challenges that we've had has, funnily enough, been time zone. I don't know if any other organisations have had this challenge as well, but certainly for us, where we've got in every single state in Australia, we've got almost different time zones at different times of the year, and having a system that will actually deal with all those different variations in time zone, in terms of logging the timestamps for rescues, as you mentioned, Will, like getting that important information. You don't want that stuff to be an hour out or anything like that, or 3 hours out in our case, sometimes across the country. So that's been a really interesting and big challenge that's taken us a few years to really nail down, and also the different operations that we actually have. So stats are gathered differently for lifeguards and lifesavers, and they're also gathered differently in different states as well. And then you introduce support services like jet rescue boats, helicopters, jet skis, all those kinds of things. You've got a lot of very different facets of information and stats gathering that we have to cater for. So I'll dive into the app now. So basically what we've done is we've developed an app called the Operations app, and it's been born mainly from an integration point with all our existing systems. So as you can see there on the slide, we've got some existing services which have been there for many years on the left. So we've got Surfguard, which is our management tool or CRM system, which essentially all of the club administrators in the states use to manage their lifeguards, clubs, support service personnel, etc. We've got our Surfcom operation centres like Surf Lifesaving New Zealand, in each state, which manages the real-time or on beach operations of what's happening on the day and incidents, those kinds of things. And then we've got some of our more static data in databases such as AbStamp, which is our beach database, which has an extensive list of information about essentially all 12,000 plus beaches in the whole of Australia, and that extends to sediment data, scientific information, descriptions of every beach, photos, all sorts of things. So one of the key things for us was to integrate all that information together along with the operations app to actually create a suite of systems which all work together. So the operations app talks to Surfguard, talks to Surfcom, talks to AppStamp, to connect all that information together. And then on top of that, we also have Beach Safe, which you can see there on the right, which is our essentially public website for the community. So all that information can actually be displayed in real time to the public, so people can make informed decisions about where they want to go to the beach for that day, for example. So as you can see, there's kind of less of an emphasis, I suppose, on just purely gathering stats on any given day for a location, and more of an emphasis on the entire pipeline or the entire suite of systems that all talk to each other across the entire country. So that's one of the big challenges for us. You know, there's not that kind of intimate one thing that we're looking at. You know, it's all about the stats and that's it. We kind of like spread quite thinly across that whole structure. So going into the app, essentially what happens is we have these three components. So for each patrol team or lifeguard service that's on duty, we've got their on-beach operation, which you know, similar to some of the other previous presentations, you can set your patrol status. What's the beach status, open, closed? Have you got an operational ATV? Have you got an operational UAV? You know, that's one that's popped up the last few years around aerial surveillance. And then also gathering things like beach attendance, the location of the patrol tent and flags. Is there a photo of the conditions? And they can update that on a regular basis. So that's the operational side of it. And then the operational side then extends through into the patrol hour side, which we gather. So that's the hours that the patrol members have actually been doing on that given day. And that's really important for us from a competition perspective. You know, members want to see that information go straight into the system. They want to do a patrol and know that when they log into their members portal that afternoon, that their hours have been logged in there. You know, they want that instantness of everything that happens these days in the world from an electronic perspective. And then also the stats as well, which I'll go through in a second. So in terms of the stats gathering, we basically break it down a lot like you know, a lot like the guys in Hawaii and those kinds of things that we saw before. So we've got kind of our key areas here around weather, hazards, beach closure reasons, you know, our hourly attendance, rescue information, first aids, preventions, missing persons, local government, ordnance, so, you know, dogs littering, public relations, that kind of thing. Marine stinger information about the actual species and you know, the count if there were any sightings, and then basic gear and equipment checks and notes. So that's kind of a basic overview. And then diving into some of these things, we kind of identified very early on in the piece that we had to make something mandatory. When you've got a paper form, nothing's necessarily mandatory unless you're telling people to fill out something. So we had to identify, since going electronic, what items do we want people to fill out definitely every patrol as a mandatory thing, and what's kind of optional. And one of the things that came up was weather, because we never had that information. Even though there is a lot of information coming from the Bureau of Meteorology, the BOM, we never quite made that link before. So what we did was we kind of decided to do both. So we made weather mandatory for the patrol to enter, but we also linked the app into the BOM, so we don't have that issue with duplication and people doing something that they don't really need to be doing. So what happens basically when they log into the app, they've got 3 points in time throughout their patrol where they can record weather, and they just have to hit the auto button here, and that basically just sucks all the weather data for that current time right then and there into the app from the Bureau of Meteorology. So they don't have to think about it. It just sucks it straight in, including all the tide details as well. And then it's up to the discretion of the patrol person on duty to make changes if need be. So some of these weather sections are, 2, 3, 4 kilometres off the coast. In that case, the wave height might be quite different on the beach as it is right out there. So they can make some informed decisions and change that information if need be. We're making it easier for them to just suck it straight into the app. So that's been a really cool little tool we've found to save a lot of time. Also an emphasis on attendance. So that's that basic, count every hour, how many swimmers are there in the water, how many craft, how many on beach, and how many swimmers outside the flags as well. And then the other one is rescue information as well. So again, we had to identify, if you're going to log a rescue, what do we actually want as mandatory information? So in this case, as you can see there's only a handful of fields that we've deemed mandatory in a rescue case. You can't mandate that postcode be entered, for example, because you're not always going to get that from a person who you've just dragged out of the water. So we had to identify a few key fields like time, gender, method, and the condition of the person as mandatory. And then if you're doing a mass rescue, as you can see here, where you've rescued 2, 3, 4, 20 people at the same time, then there's even less emphasis on some of that information, and it's really more about what time was it done and what was the location of that specific rescue. So where possible, trying to get as much information as we can. I suppose just to wrap it up, a couple of pages of interest within the app. So as you can see here, as people are logging attendance throughout any given day on the beach, that information is mapped in real time within the app for anyone to see. So at an individual club level, or even up at a state level, or even down at a kind of a council level or branch level, you can actually see the aggregate totals of the attendance throughout the day in real time as you go. And you can zip back to previous days and see that information too. So that's something we've never, ever had before, which is awesome. The ability to create an incident and manage it through the app. And then also the activity feed. So one thing we found going electronic was we lost the radio chatter that a lot of volunteers are used to hearing radio chatter and knowing what's happening at other beaches. So we introduced this concept of an activity feed where even though there might not be as much radio chatter and everything's been done electronic, you can still sift through the radio feed and see what's happening around you, and even drill down to within a certain distance from your club if you just want to see what's happening around, specifically around you. So kind of what we've learned, by making it electronic, it's allowed us to determine what information is mandatory and optional, as I mentioned before. Also just the variation in coastline, environment conditions. Marine stingers maybe not be an issue in the deep south of Australia, but it is certainly an issue up north. Crocodiles as well. So all of those little variations. We're also just the emphasis on improving the data quality, and also the quantity of data in terms of the data that we actually really want. Real-time data capture and use for reporting. And then also, I guess, just to finish on in terms of security and logins and things like that, that was the one thing we found. Now, how are we going to manage this when you think about 300 surf clubs, you've got 2 or 3 people in each patrol team, potentially 10, 20 patrol teams per club. You're talking about thousands of people who are logging into this app on a weekend to record the information. So we've got a members portal, basically, which all the members use for renewing their membership and checking their awards and all those kinds of things. So we've set that up as a single sign-on instance. And basically the focus for Lifesavers is we've tried to focus on bring your own device. We can't roll out thousands and thousands of tablets. So it's all about bring your own device, use your own phone and your own internet, but you just log into the app using your single sign-on login for your members area, and then you can do everything you need to based on the fact that you're already known as a patrol captain, vice captain, etc. So, so that's pretty much a wrap from me.